I'd like to open the Board of Adjustment meeting for February 6th, 2014. We have no public hearings tonight. We do, however, have minutes from the meeting of January 16th, 2014, a special meeting. That is our first item on the agenda. And who will we be seating as Board of Adjustment members for this meeting?
I have Mr. Deach, Mrs. Scott, Mr. Jurgismeyer, and you're abstaining, correct?
Well, I'll have to abstain from the minutes. I wasn't at that last meeting.
Okay, and then we have alternate A is Mr. Schwab, and alternate C is Mr. Dickey.
All right. That sounds fine.
No, it must be the other one.
I'll do it. You looking for a motion?
That would be good, yes.
Okay, I move that the minutes be accepted as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Jurgismeyer and second by Mr. Schwab to approve the minutes of the January 16th, 2014 Board of Adjustment meeting. Any other questions, comments, or discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deach,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Jurgismeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Schwab,
Yes.
Mr. Dickey.
Yes.
And that motion carries 5-0. All right, next on the agenda, we have then the finding of fact and conclusions of law regarding the setback variance request for Lot 11 of Arrowhead Manor located at 13 Squaw Court. Mr. Hampton, do you want to make any comments on that, or do we just proceed?
I would say just proceed. The city attorney has reviewed it before it was presented to you.
And do we just need a motion for approval
To approve
of them
it.
as presented?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, well, we've got a motion by Mrs. Scott and a second by Mr. Deach to approve the findings of fact as presented. Any other discussion, questions, or comments? Again, roll call vote.
Mr. Jurgismeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Schwab,
Yes.
Mr. Dickey,
Yes.
Mr. Deach,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott.
Yes.
And that motion carries by a vote of 5-0 and now becomes final ordinance. So that variance is now in effect. All right. Okay. Now, if we can have a motion, we will close the Board of Adjustment meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jurgismeyer, second by Mrs. Scott to close the Board of Adjustment. Any questions, comments, or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, that meeting is closed. We'll now move into our regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 6th, 2014 for the City of Warrenton. The first item on our agenda is a public hearing for amendment to Appendix A of the city zoning ordinance. And Mr. Hanf will tell us about that.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. First, we have a proposed text amendment to Appendix A, listing of permitted and conditional uses within the zoning district, ADM 66. On January 7th, 2014, a request was filed for text amendment approval to Appendix A to change the zoning grid to allow a boarding house as a conditional use within the R3 zoning district. I'd also like to ask to make part of the public record the municipal code by reference, the public hearing notice, and my P&Z report.
Anyone have any questions or comments from Mr. Hanf? And is there anyone here to speak for or against this amendment in the public hearing? Okay, if you'll come forward, please, and state your name.
Hi, I'm Kathy Pritchett, and I am the owner of Step Up Transitional Living Program, which is in the, I don't know all the correct terms, in the area we're asking for conditional use to be approved for that area. I guess first I just wanted to apologize for opening a business 2 years ago, and the zoning is not approved for that business. It was not an intentional thing. My husband and I, Greg, who is here with me tonight, have been foster parents in Warren County for 10 years. And when we opened the transitional living program, which is for foster children, it just kind of flowed right in, and we just kind of expanded what we were doing as foster parents. So it certainly was not intentional. When it came to our attention that we were in violation, we met with Jack and got an understanding of what we needed to do, and that's why we made this request. I put together information on the program. I don't know how much time you want me to take to talk about it, but it's basically a program where we get paid a daily rate from Children's Division from the state per kid. We take them in, and they live individually in the apartments. Greg and I live on site in one of the apartments or villas, and we teach them independent living skills. We oversee them, make sure they're behaving themselves and as much as teenagers can. Their age is 16 to 20 in general, and we have a lot of them up at the school. We actually have one of our kids is going to be, I guess, he's going to be at the school board meeting next week. He was Student of the Month, and so we got a lot of great kids there, and just really wanted to present that to you and ask you to allow a conditional use permit.
All right. Thank you, Ms.
Questions?
Pritchett. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or in opposition to the amendment request? All right, we will close that public hearing. And the next item on the agenda is the public hearing for Title Max.
Once again, I'd like to ask that the part of the public hearing record is the municipal code by reference, my P&Z report, and the public hearing notice. This is a request, site plan approval request for Title Max to be located at 711 North Highway 47. Property is Zone C3 Highway Commercial. On January 3rd, 2014, a request was filed for site plan approval for a proposed Title Max lending institution. Per Appendix A, 3 commercial use, retail sales and service, pawnbrokers and secured personal credit loans. A conditional use permit is required. This site plan approval request has been submitted by the applicant along with the conditional use permit approval request as required per section 405.340.
All right, anyone have any other questions on that? And at this time, we would open the mic for anyone in the public or in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of or in opposition to that request.
Good evening. My name is Jim Tebow. I'm the Director of Real Estate for Title Max, and this is Barbara Bernard, who's with me this evening. She is the Regional Operations Manager, and we are really here just to answer any potential questions that anyone might have regarding Title Max, our business.
All right. And we may have questions, additional questions later on in the meeting as well.
Sure.
Does anyone have questions at this time?
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. Anyone else here to speak on behalf or in opposition to the Title Max public hearing? All right, then we will move on to the third item on our agenda, which is the conditional use permit public hearing for the Title Max.
Once again, I'd like to ask that part of the public hearing record is the municipal code by reference, the public hearing notice, and my P&Z report. This is a proposed approval for conditional use permit approval for Title Max located at 711 North Highway 47. And basically the same as what we just went over. It's a
Right.
requirement, and they have obviously applied for the site plan too.
Any questions from anyone here? And again, anyone in the audience that wanted to make any comments for or against that request? All right, we will close that public hearing. That brings us to the regular meeting portion. And the first item on the regular meeting agenda will be the approval of the minutes from the January 2, 2014 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I thought there was a miscue somewhere on one of the votes, but I couldn't find it, so it must be right. So I would look back through it, looked like I said, or made the motion and then voted against it, which I didn't remember doing, but apparently I read it wrong when I was reading the minutes. That said, I would make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
All right.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Scott, and was the second by Mr. Dickey?
Yep.
All right. Any questions, comments, or further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Jurgesmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
I abstain.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
All right. And motion carries by a vote of 6-0 with 1 abstention and 3 absent. Is that right?
Yep.
All right. Next, we have the application for the Festival of Fun for I guess that's a special event permit request. And as I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Warrenton Area Chamber of Commerce, which is the requesting organization, I'm going to step away from the dais and let the rest of you talk this over, and then I'll return after the issue is considered. And does that put Mrs. Scott in charge?
Yes, it does.
All right.
All right. Let's discuss.
Correct, I would.
All right. Are there any questions?
I've just got a comment. I've looked this over, and it was basically the same as they had last year, and everything went good last year. The chief of police has looked at it and signed off on it. The restroom facilities are no problem. I'm ready to start on it.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
All right.
And I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Questions or comments? Roll call vote?
Mr. Costello is here. Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Jurgesmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Costello is absent, sort of. Not available for the vote. How's that work?
At the moment.
6. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstention. And you can come back and have your job back.
We didn't want you on very long.
That's how we roll in P&Z.
Just long enough for the seat to get cold.
Hopefully you didn't miss me. All right, moving on, our next item on the agenda is the amendment to Appendix A. Again, this is the same item as we had for the public hearing, so Mr. Hanf has already spoken on the issue.
And this is for the step up?
This is for step up.
Okay, now I'm going to leave the dais as I have a business relationship with step up, so.
All right.
I thought it was me.
It's kind of music chairs, isn't it?
I was getting a little bit upset.
Okay. So I can recall quite some time back, probably 3 to 4 years ago, there was a review of the overall appendix and this particular section of the appendix and the different types of occupancies that are permitted, conditional, et cetera. And I don't recall specifically boarding houses being part of the discussion. I do remember, though, that there was a provision to allow permitted use for group homes. And I'm kind of curious, I don't know, Mr. Hanf, if there's a stated definition difference between a group home versus a boarding house.
Per the city attorney, and I did include the group home definition in your packet. The group home definition per state of Missouri's definition, the type of activities that Step Up performs would not qualify to fall under a group home category.
Okay.
That it would be clearly considered a boarding home,
All right.
or boarding house.
From what I read, it looks like the group home allows for up to 8 mentally or disabled or developmentally or physically disabled persons and 2 house parents together, versus this is just a building. The boarding house definition is a building other than a hotel or apartment hotel where compensation and prearrangement for definite periods, lodging, meals, or combined lodging and meals are provided.
And me and Mr. Graville met with Kathy on the 7th and discussed the definitions, and I believe you agreed with, it did not fall into that specific definition.
We don't have house parents in the villas with them, so it wouldn't qualify for that. They actually do live in the villas without a parent in the villa with them.
And
I'm sorry.
we will need you to step to the podium, just so that we can get your comments on
On
the,
record.
on the record.
I can be a
please.
little more relaxed now. Yeah, the difference is, and I don't feel like we exactly fit a boarding home. There's not an exact fit, but it definitely fits what the definition is. The care home, there are care homes there. Emmaus has a couple group homes on Market Street, right up the street from us, but they actually have staff 24/7 in the building with them. The villas that we in, it's one building. I'm not sure, I guess you all know what the building is there. The 2 units that we have the youth in, there's not an adult that lives there with them. So that's really the difference. They live there, we provide, I pay the rent, I pay the utilities, I give them a food allowance. So that's exactly what the boarding house says. But they're actually placed there by the state. So they're kids in foster care. I have allowed a couple kids to move in that are community kids, as I call them, that aren't in foster care. But there's no funding for that, so that's just kind of been, I've just let them be there. So I get a daily rate per kid in order to teach them life skills and do what they do there. But that's the basic difference between the boarding house and the group home.
So they essentially manage their own individual household in that respect.
Correct. Yes. Now Greg, my husband, works full-time in Troy, so he has a full-time job. He's my part-time maintenance guy. And then I work full-time. I'm there 24/7. I have a full-time staff member that also comes in 4 days a week. And then I have 2 part-time young people that get to come and just do fun stuff with the kids and that type of thing. We have therapists that we work with. We work with the Career Center. We work with NECAC. We do volunteer work there.
Is this the time to ask questions about the operation?
Yes, absolutely.
You have a lot of rules, and that's, I was impressed by that, but if there's no adult living in the villas with these kids, how do you see that they follow those strict rules?
I'm there 24/7 I obviously, if I have to take a child to an appointment.
And you say you're there, what does that mean?
I live on site. I live in a villa.
Oh, one of the villas connected to
Yes, there's
this.
3 villas, and Greg and I live in the villa. So I eat, sleep, and breathe it. I work it more than I should, and that I am currently, there's not enough money there for me to hire the staff that I really want to get there, so we're working to that. The basement of my villa is the office for the business, and then we live in the upstairs portion. So my goal is to eventually be able to have staff that's there so that I can take some time off. But the way we control it is we have staff right on site. I walk into the units unannounced. I have keys to everything. I'm researching getting an alarm system and cameras on the outside. what I want to be really careful of is these kids come from residential facilities. They come from all over the state. And some of them are very institutionalized, and I'm trying to break them of that. You know, everybody gets up at the same time and everybody does the same thing. And what they're used to there is there's cameras, and it's not real life. And so I struggle with having cameras, but I also want to make sure they're not sneaking out at night or people aren't sneaking in. You know, they are teenagers, and I've fostered over 65 children in the 10 years that we've been foster parents, so I have some experience with teenagers. There's no perfect, but I guess the basic answer is I live on site.
So one of the rules was that, and there's 3 different levels, I guess, of your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to be in their beds from 9, 10, 11.
Mm-hmm. And that's not a perfect
I
world.
just didn't know how you control.
I do spot checks. I might show up at midnight and just do a walkthrough, and I do bed checks. Another night I've gone at 2 in the morning. I don't sleep much. I just have been that way my whole life. So, and they know it. And the kids, so I walk the perimeter. And actually we think we have a bobcat. Is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So after I walked the perimeter by myself a couple times at 2 a.m. and realized that there was a bobcat in the area, I thought, I don't know if I should be doing that, but I don't have a lot of fear, so we've seen the bobcat, and we started 2 years ago, and I will tell you, the first group, we started with girls, and the first group of boys we brought in was not a good group of boys. We had 4 boys, rough. We had a rough group. And we learned from that group, and I can ask for them to be removed anytime for any reason. And we asked for them to be removed. And since then, our interview process is a lot different. I take my time. In the beginning, it was like, I just want residents. I just want to start the program and get going. And now we have a waiting list. I turn people away. We're a lot choosier. We've gotten a reputation in the state of Missouri as being the premium program. There is not another program like us. The facilities Jack's been out. I would invite any of you to come see them. We're very proud of them. They're very nice. They're a lot bigger on the inside than they look like from the outside. And we do it because we want the kids to feel like they matter, that they deserve something. If you ever saw what these kids live in other places where there's transitional living programs, it's criminal, in my opinion. So anyway, we build a lot of self-esteem, and we really work hard on that. We don't have perfect kids. We've had the police out. Anytime the police have come out in the 2 years, it's because I made the phone call to have them come out. We've never had the police called on us. And mostly, it's been runaway kids. They've been placed there, and they don't want to be there. So that's what we do different now. We don't take kids that don't want to be there. We take kids that want to be there. And that's made a huge difference, because they're trying and really trying to better their lives. Some of them have actually said, Warrenton's it's my home now. And they've come from Springfield, Columbia, and this is where they want to make their home. And we have our first one getting married in September, and his fiance is in Jeff City, and she's going to be moving here, and so they're starting to put some roots down. The property that we step forward, which is the step they move to, the 3rd step, is when we actually move them into the community, into an apartment, more on their own. We still check on them, but not as much, and we're not on site. They're actually in an apartment.
Adequate. Jack, what brought this to light that they weren't approved?
We received a complaint, and I just went out there on an informational stop, knocked on her door unannounced, explained I was from the city, and was just wanting to verify what was taking place there. Kathy opened the door immediately, gave me a a tour of not only her unit, but we went next door to both of the other units. Everything
The
seemed-
person who complained, are they now satisfied they didn't show up here tonight?
Well, I couldn't answer.
I mean, I don't even know that, but I mean, were they really upset? I mean,
They had questions of what was going on there.
okay.
And I probably say, I could talk to you all night, but I allowed a community kid to move in, a young girl who was 17, and she left her home. Her parents didn't want her to leave, and she left because things weren't good at home, and I allowed her to move in. I checked with the police first, actually, and made sure, and I checked with Children's Division before I allowed her to move in to make sure there wasn't going to be any trouble, because in our state, at 17, you can leave home and you're not a runaway, but you're not an adult till you're 18, so it's a funky year in between there. So I allowed her to move in, and I don't know who called, but that's who I suspect called, because they made a lot of comments about trying to shut me down, and there were issues with that, but that would be my suspicion. And we have a neighbor who was here earlier, actually. I don't know if he called, but we talked with him before the meeting and gave him a packet, and nice guy, he owns all the property next to us, and he said, no, that's really all I need to know, and he left. So I don't know if it was him that called or if it was the upset parents, but those are my only guesses. And she's now moved out of the program. She's got her own apartment in town. She's a great kid, doing very well, and she's 18 now. She's about to graduate from school. She's going to Lindenwood College. Good kid, doing really well.
How many kids are in each unit? Or
We can-
what's the maximum number you can have?
The maximum is 4 in each unit.
Okay.
And then from there, again, after they show responsibility, we've kind of, the 2 other units we have are on Main Street right next to Brewski, and that's the step forward, and that's the prize they get for, doing the things they need to do. We've also kind of, we've decided that they have to be 18. They have to at least be a senior in high school. It's crazy when you think about it, that we have kids 16, 17 in high school, living on their own, getting themselves up for school, cooking their own meals, doing their own grocery shopping, and it's hard to even think about, but the reality is these kids, they get released from foster care, and literally, they're sitting on the steps of the courthouse going, I don't have a family to go to, Children's Division can't transport me anymore because I'm not in care and insurance doesn't cover it, and they have no life skills. They have not a penny to their name, so they're pretty incredible. I was going to bring a couple tonight, but because they have to be on camera, I can't bring them because the state has rules about foster kids having their face on camera without a judge approving it first. So I really would love for you to meet them. They're great kids.
Are the limits as far as how many kids can be in each unit self-imposed limits?
They are. In the girls, right now I have 3, and I don't get in a hurry to do more than 3. I've done 4, and I can. But if you can imagine girls in a unit, it can be a lot of drama, and I could actually probably have 5 based on bedrooms. Actually, I could probably have 6. But 4 is self-imposed, definitely. I've had Children's Division come out, even though my contract is with Missouri Alliance, who is a contractor to Children's Division, I still have Children's Division come out, and they do a little form where they approve the space, and I could have up to 6 people, but not a good idea. Too little space. Plus, we want them to learn. I mean, ideally, you're not, unless you're in college and you're in a house, with a bunch of kids, you're not going to usually have 6 people in an apartment. Typically, you'd have a couple roommates. So we try to simulate as much as we can normal.
How many of the kids that you deal with are from the community versus from outside the community?
Right now, very little, because my contract is only with Missouri Alliance. And so our very first resident was a Warren County girl. And she actually was a girl who we had as a foster daughter, and she left the county to go to a residential, and she was trying to get back to the county, and she pushed her caseworker to come back and be placed with us. And at the time, we were getting ready to start this program, and I said, I can't take placements and run the program because there's too much of a conflict. And so we started the program literally for her. And since then, we have not had any from the county because there's no, it would have to be that exact situation where it happened to be a county kid here that left. And because they don't, the kids get referred, every county is different. This county, all the kids come into Children's Division when they come into custody. If they are kids with extenuating circumstances, they need more help, they'll refer them to Missouri Alliance. Other counties, they just rotate. So this kid comes in Children's Division, this one goes to Missouri Alliance. So it's different with every county. But right now, I don't have a contract with Children's Division. It's a lot thicker packet, so that's with the state. But I am working on that. Because what happens, they get here and they get they're stabilized when they're here, then they refer them back to Children's Division. So the kids that I have from other counties, they can't refer them back because they'd have to disrupt their placement here, because if they transfer them back to Children's Division, they can't stay at Step Up. So we're working on that piece of it to get that. And I'd love to take kids from this county. I've had several foster kids from here that want to come to the program, and I'm like, well, tell your caseworker to refer you to Missouri Alliance. But they can't do it unless they have the exact criteria to do it.
Who owns the units? Do you own the units?
No, we rent. I'd love to buy them at some point. Demeen Construction owns the units. They own the movie theater behind us as well. They've been wonderful. They knew from the beginning what we were doing and very supportive, and we just do our thing and quietly go on our way. But he's approached me. He wants to sell.
Yeah.
They don't want to keep it. But we're just not in a position now. I'm hoping this year that I can write up a proposal to at least do rent to own, because what we're paying for rent right now, we could be paying as a mortgage payment and we would own it. But I'm just not personally in a position to do that. We are an LLC single owner. I'm the single owner. I did not open it as a nonprofit. Originally, I'm kind of a little bit of a control freak, and I just like to have control. And I have a very clear picture in my head of what these kids need. I feel like I have a lot of experience working with the system. I have a lot of frustrations with it, but I also have learned how to get things done, and I just want to be that person that can do that. I found a great staff member who grew up in the foster care. Well, she wasn't in foster care, but her parents fostered 11 kids and adopted them. She was a foster parent, so she's got a lot of experience in that. She's been a great asset.
Mr. Hand, I know that by the pure definition, boarding house is the closest thing that fits the occupancy that's occurring now. And so we've got a text amendment request to consider. But as a matter for future consideration, is there any logic in possibly adding transitional living facility as an item within the appendix? Because I think to some degree what we're looking at in this particular instance isn't what immediately springs to mind when you think of a boarding house.
We could definitely add that, and we could add it right now because we're having a public hearing for changing the zoning grid. We can sure move forward to add a new definition. And see if
I would agree with that 100%.
To have that definition added to the zoning grid. Is that where you're going with that?
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking, because one of the things that anytime we look at an issue that always concerns me is we look narrowly at the specific, in this instance,
right,
this case, and then we essentially open this category then and make it a conditional use in an R3 zone, in theory. And the next time something similar, but maybe not exactly the same, comes along that might have some elements that are less desirable for one reason or another, we've now kind of created our own, I guess, our own problem because it's too broad. So I'm more of a mind to more narrowly define transitional living and perhaps leave boarding house alone for the time being unless we see that there's a compelling reason why a boarding house itself should be broadly considered in the R3 zone. That's my thought.
It's interesting because as I talked with the youth in the program about possibly coming to speak, and I was explaining to them what we were doing, they got very defensive, and they're like, "We're not a boarding home. This is our home. We live here. This is where we," and while in a sense it is a temporary home for them, and they don't really see it, but they don't see it that way. They see it as that's their home. But I would agree 100%. My dream is to finish building out the circle and it not just be for foster kids, and to do transitional living for whatever the need is at some point. But I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And I would think perhaps the city staff and city attorney ought to have some consideration of what constitutes transitional living. Are we talking transitional living in this case for basically young adults that are learning to live on their own? Transitional living could, in some cases, be considered transitional in, say, a rehab situation, or transitional from a situation where somebody was going from being imprisoned to living on their own. And personally, I would feel more comfortable having it very narrowly defined for this specific purpose, so that we don't open it up to all these other possibilities without having the chance to look at them.
Even if it was still under conditional use?
Right, I think the conditional use should be included.
Would you want to table it tonight then, and we could get an exact definition for transitional living? And
Makes sense to me.
I think so. My concern
bring it back before you?
My concern reading boarding house is, I know your need because I deal with the system also, so I think that you're filling a role that needs to be filled. But that's pretty broad, and I could unfortunately see, the limits that you've placed on the number of kids living in the house seems reasonable, but there is no limit under boarding house, and I could see, because I've seen good foster parents and bad foster parents, I could see a good operation and a bad operation, and I think that it would be worth the city's time to spend some, I agree with Mr. Costello.
In a boarding house, I don't know a lot about boarding houses, but I don't know that the supervision is there. This is I always say we're the best tenant that you can have, because when you go to a landlord and say, "I've got 8 teenagers I want to live in your apartment all by themselves," they think you've lost your mind. But when you say, "I'm in there every day and I'm watching it, and it's my deposit and it's my reputation, and I feel like I'm the best tenant you could have," sort of, for the most part. But it's very different than a boarding house where they're just living there.
Do we need a motion on this?
I think if we're going to table, we would have a motion, yes.
Then I move that we table this pending a report from the city attorney regarding proposed addition of transitional living.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Mr. Deach, second by Mr. Jurgismeyer to table consideration so that city staff and city attorney can further develop a definition for transitional living to be considered as a conditional use.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Any
I do.
Other discussion, comments, questions? Roll call vote?
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Jurgismeyer?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries by a vote of 6-0 with 1 abstention and 3 absent.
Thank you very
So
much.
We'll be
Appreciate
taking
it.
this up again at another meeting. Thank you. All right. Well, that was a long way around, but it might give us a better outcome. And thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Pritchett, for coming out tonight.
Very much.
All right, we can now move on to item number 4 on the agenda. And Mrs. Scott, you can return, of course. This will be the consideration of the Title Max site plan.
We have a request for site plan approval for a proposed Title Max to be located at 711 North Highway 47.
Okay? Everybody see, of course, we've all seen the signs and we know exactly where the facility is, so.
It's the old Hardee's building.
Yes, Hardee's and other things. Anyone have any observations, questions, or concerns with the site plan? No? All right.
They're basically using the exterior as is. I'm sure they're going to end up having a sign permit for some new signage, and they have applied for and have approval for a building permit for some interior renovations. But I think they're waiting till the site plan and conditional use is approved before they proceed with the interior work. Fine.
There's only one thing on here that I've noticed on this drawing is I see an entryway, but I don't see an exit.
Are you talking about the parking lot entry, or are you talking about the building?
The building, well, it's got showing an entryway there. I don't see an exit unless we're going to use the same one entry and exit and only have one.
Isn't. You're talking about the building itself or the parking lot?
The building.
The building.
Now, the existing walkway, that's where it's showing an entryway right there.
That's your way to go into that building. You talking about the entrance in?
Well, on the drawing, there's only, it shows an entry, but I don't see an exit.
To the building.
Yeah.
Well, there's a rear door to that building.
And there's a side door.
Yeah,
I thought they had two doors there, but
Yeah, there is two
I don't
doors.
see it on the drawing.
It just might not be labeled on this site plan, but he does have two doors.
I don't know if it's a public exit in the rear. It wasn't when it was a Hardee's, but it could be, I guess, maybe.
I remember it had two doors on the north side there.
And the fire department will perform an inspection prior to them opening. So if there's any code requirements, fire code related, it would be brought to their attention too.
If I remember correctly, there's a door on what would kind of be the front of the building and a door on the side as well.
Would they be subjected to any kind of landscaping and stuff that's not there now?
I figured this would fall in the sort of the same category as the one we just approved up the hill here, that they're doing nothing, there's no exterior changes being made, and with the majority of it being concrete and that, I did not
There's no landscaping there now.
require any special landscaping, but if you would like to make that part of the consideration, I could put something together for them to have before the board meeting.
I mean, I don't have any specific requests, but I just, you know, we do that for, like when Dairy Queen came in, we made them put all kinds of landscaping.
And that was a new project.
Yeah. So
With this, they're using everything existing.
Okay.
But we can sure
It's
include
been
that.
vacant for what, 2 years?
Probably at least.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when we revised some of the landscaping requirements. I know this building, was the building built in 1986? Or
That sounds right.
maybe
That I don't know.
87, somewhere around there. So I don't know what landscape requirements existed at the time that the building was built. I mean, now if this building were to be built, there'd be some requirement for some foundation plantings and things like that.
we're not opposed to any landscaping and anything that you guys propose. The one thing our founder takes great pride in is the aesthetics of the building and the brand, so I think we'd be really pleased the way it looks. But we're absolutely not opposed to sprucing it up.
Would you want to make that part of the decision that they include a landscape plan prior to the
I would.
Alderman meeting?
I would.
Especially if you're comfortable with that?
No problem.
Any other concerns with the site plan?
Is everything else about the building going to remain the same? On the outside? Is the drive-through remaining and all that?
I don't believe they're taking the pavement out.
Right.
It's not going to be a drive
We won't
per
utilize,
se,
we won't utilize the drive-through.
but they're not going to demo the pavement, if I understand it correctly.
I'll take fries with that.
Covered part.
Yeah. That's how fast their processing is, huh?
That's pretty quick, yeah. Get your money in the second window.
Any other questions or discussion on the site plan itself?
Nothing on the site plan, but I would certainly encourage anything you can do to improve the general overall appearance of that building, since it sits on the entryway to town, so to speak. So,
It hasn't gotten a lot of love lately.
no.
We'll give it a lot of love.
We'll be
very
very
pleased.
pleased with
We'll be
the
very
final
pleased.
product, I guarantee it.
And what hours does Title Max operate?
We're open from 9 to 7, Monday through Friday, and 10 to 4 on Saturdays.
Other questions or concerns? Mr. Jergersmeyer, would you want to include your preference for the landscaping in a motion?
I would make a motion that we accept your site plan with the provision that you do some landscaping there. And will we leave it up to them to make the choice, or?
I think they should submit a landscape plan that can
Take
be
you
reviewed
see the
and
landscape
approved.
plan, okay.
And I
That
can
would be
send
my
you the
motion.
specs, or they're online if you want to. Perfect.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Mr. Jergersmeyer, second by Mr. Schwab to recommend approval of the site plan request with the provision that the landscape plan be turned in for consideration prior to final approval by the Board of Aldermen. Any other questions or concerns? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Jergersmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
And that motion carries by a vote of 7-0 with 3 absent, and that will come before the Board of Aldermen at their next meeting, which will be on Tuesday, the 18th.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All right.
Well, technically, their next meeting is Monday, the 10th, because they had a snow delay meeting, but the next scheduled one that I have my public hearings scheduled for would be the 18th.
Even the wheels of government slow for the weather, don't they?
This one they do.
Okay, next and final thing on our regular agenda then is the consideration of the conditional use permit for Title Max. So we'll open that for discussion. I know we've covered a lot of it in the site plan review, but are there further questions or concerns from the conditional use permit request? The silence is deafening.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for Title Max.
And I will second that.
Motion by Mrs. Scott and second by Mr. Deitch to approve the recommend approval of the conditional use permit for the Title Max. Any other questions or concerns? Roll call vote?
Mr. Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Jergersmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
And that motion passes by a vote of 7-0 with 3 absent. So that will then also come before the Board of Aldermen for their consideration on Tuesday, February 18th. So we can now close the Planning and Zoning meeting and go to our Planning and Zoning Officer report.
The only thing that I have scheduled for sure for next month's meeting, besides bringing back the step-up revised Appendix A for that, is there's been a request to also revise the zoning grid for by the Elks Lodge to allow camping at the facility. So that'll be on next month's agenda. It's popular.
Been there, done that.
In the building or in the parking lot?
In the building.
I assume in the parking lot area. They've not produced any plans.
Camping in the parking lot.
All right.
That's it.
All right, any other questions from Mr. Hand? No comments? All right. The only thing left to do is adjourn. We need a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Deeston, second by Mr. Shanko?
Nope.
Nope. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.